My entire name is Linda K. Bennington. Who am I? That's something that probably since the moment I was born I've been trying to figure out. I am a person, I was born in a very small town, grew up in a small town of 500 people in the middle of West Virginia, right in the middle of the hills. And I always wanted to know what was going on in all of the world. I was always interested in knowing other people's culture, other people's backgrounds. I read voraciously in school. I would read biographies. I wanted to know what life was like for everybody that was living in the world. And I wanted to try and understand it. So I was always seeking to know the essence of the world and the people in it. That's still an ongoing project. Well, my childhood was, I had a number of things go on in my childhood. To start with, my parents told me that right after I was born, my father's family lived in Iowa, and we drove to Iowa to visit them. And I guess I was about 6 weeks old, and they told me I cried the entire time. I came in and cried for a long time. I think it was because I didn't want to be here, but I eventually accepted it. I had a lot of illnesses, and then when I was 5, during the polio epidemic, I got polio, and I was totally paralyzed. The doctor came to the house to see me because the nearest town with the hospital was 45 miles away. And I had a fever, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And I distinctly remember telling the physician I had polio. I knew what I had. So I ended up in the hospital for 6 weeks. And my parents were allowed to visit me 1 hour a week on Sundays. So I was sort of just dropped off there. I got to know people in the hospital. I was lucky that the paralysis started going away, and I went through physical therapy. I had a bad incident in the hospital in terms of the nurse, for breakfast, the other kids were getting like cornflakes and stuff, and she gave me oatmeal, cooked oatmeal with no flavoring. And I said I would like to have cornflakes, and they said, no, you have to eat this. And I refused. I said I wasn't going to do it, so she got behind me and shoved it down my throat. And I will never forget that. I didn't eat oatmeal again until I was a senior in high school. And after becoming a nurse myself, I remember those incidents. And it always played a large part in my life about working with people and understanding where they were coming from, trying to understand. I always tell, I work with, as you know, a lot of women having babies, and I always tell them to go on what their gut instinct is and to try to remember what they wanted at that point in their life. A lot of people don't remember their childhood. I remember mine, many incidents from it specifically. I lived right in the middle of a small town of 500 people. One road went through it. I was on a river. So we had a lot of freedom. Wasn't much to be afraid of. The family across the street from me, he was a coal miner. I had a lot of coal miners in town. And actually, when I turned 5 and I came home from the hospital, I had to go through physical therapy for a year. There was a coal miners' strike. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Matewan, but it was a lot like that. And it was in the Saturday Evening Post in New York, my hometown, was in the news at that point because brothers and brothers were shooting each other, trying to get the union in. So it was a lot of that growing up. I just thought it was normal. We had diversity. It was an integrated area, but it was predominantly white. I don't think that we were fairly homogeneous, though. You just accepted everybody in town for who they were. It didn't matter. So those are the things I remember. Always spoke to everybody on the street, whether you knew them or not. You would maybe have a conversation. So it was very relaxed. It was always a very peaceful place to live. I always felt protected by the mountains. Well, for one thing, in high school we had no cliques because we were pretty much all of us the same economic level. Both my mother and father worked. We had a garden. A lot of people in my county was 100% welfare, approximately that. My parents worked, but nobody was rich. Maybe there might have been a couple of people, but of my friends, maybe one of them, but it was never an issue. Nobody had more than anybody else. And my best friend, who's still my friend, 73 years later, we still talk, and it didn't matter what your background was. Everybody was pretty much accepted. I mean, there was the usual gossip. My mother did hair, so there was a lot of gossip, but her beauty shop was in our home, and I would hear a lot of gossip. So I knew a lot of things about people in town that maybe I shouldn't have known. But it was, I thought it was very interesting. We had one doctor in town, and you just went to him or you called him whenever anything happened. So, and you didn't go to the doctor unless it was an emergency. You wouldn't go for something minor. So when I left home, I was glad to get out. When I left, I started college right after I graduated from high school. And that was like heaven to me because I got to know so many different people, ethnicities, culture, and I loved it. My parents were not religious. They did not raise me in any religion. I was always interested in it, in the forms of spirituality and what people believed. So that was one of the things I found interesting when I went to college. I went to different churches with everybody, just to try to get a sense of, I think, purpose. I think that was probably when I was younger. I would ask my mother questions like, why are we here? Which she never could answer. And she told me that I asked way too many questions. She didn't know where they come from. But I became aware of my hillbilly accent when I went to college because people made fun of me. And I gradually changed over time. My kids say when I go back to visit, I start talking like that again. But I did change the way I talked. Mostly I would listen because I wanted to know about everybody else. I basically wanted to know what was the point of being here in the world. What was the world? What's the reason? I was always searching for a purpose because I didn't think that just being born into the world was pure accident. There had to be a reason. Everything that I've experienced in my life has been building up from the time when I was born, all experiences. I believe that everything that happens to you happens for a reason, and I didn't lament anything that happened. It might seem like it was a terrible thing, but I always felt every experience was to learn from. And I know one of the things that happened when I had polio was people said to my mother, well, you know, she'll never walk again because she's paralyzed. And that was one thing that I remember distinctly. And I remember thinking at the time, I can if I want to. And I didn't let the paralysis I didn't even think about it staying with me. I was determined that it was an experience I had to get through and the outcome would be fine. And so everything that's happened to my life since then has been on that principle, that whatever happened, excuse me, was for a reason, and I needed to experience it so that I could help others and be of benefit in some way. And with patients, when they know that you've had a similar experience, when you share that with them, it has a tremendous impact on them because they look at you and go, well, you made it through. So I've had a number of things. I had polio. If I do my medical history, I've had everything. I just go through and check, yes. I've had breast cancer, I had cervical cancer. I had something called DIC, where your blood doesn't clot, and I hemorrhaged. I've had all of these things. And every time I had them and go through any suffering with any of it, I would always think, there's a reason for this. You learn from your experience and you grow. And that's also with people. So could I say any particular one thing? Everything that I went through and I experienced throughout my life has added to the past experience that I had. It took me a long time because I think because of my reasoning, being with people because you're supposed to be with people for a reason, probably held me together in a relationship that I shouldn't have stayed in, but I did. And when I finally got up the courage to leave on my own, and that's only been maybe in the past 6 or 7 years, that I feel like I really came into my own. And look back on everything because you learn from everything. Well, when I went to college the first time, I majored in chemistry. I did not intend to do that. It came out inadvertently. But I was told in high school that I wasn't good at science because I wasn't making a good score on the test. And they told me I should take home ec for a science to go to college. Well, home ec doesn't count as a science, so I had to take chemistry. And I found out that I liked it because we had a lot of explanations. So when I got to college, I went the summer before I would normally start. And I said I didn't have an advisor. They said, "What's your major?" And I said, "Chemistry." My original intent had been to major in French because I wanted to be an interpreter at the UN. But I thought, well, I don't know why I said that, but I'll stick with it. And I didn't even know to say that I was to teach it. I just said chemistry, so I got put in the straight program. One of my best friends, still a very good friend, we met in that program studying in the bathroom in the dorm at night because our roommates couldn't have the light on. We both graduated in chemistry, and I think the only reason we did it was because they kept telling us women had no place in chemistry. And that was a point in time where I think women were beginning to recognize that we had a worth in this world and we should be recognized. So that was the beginning of becoming a liberated woman in our society. I grew through, when I was in college, I went to college wearing a pillbox hat and I left wearing beads and going barefoot, right? So a lot happened during my time in college. My freshman year, JFK was assassinated. My senior year, Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy were assassinated. That sort of is very descriptive of the changes I was going through at the same time. And she and I looked at each other when we graduated and said, why did we do that? And she joined the Peace Corps. And I thought, well, maybe I should just get a master's degree. Biochemistry might be different. That relates to the human body. So I did that, and then I went on, I got my master's, and then I went on to work on my PhD. And that's when I met my significant other. And I, at some point decided, I don't like working in a lab. This is not the thing to do. So he and I ended up together. We moved to Florida. I had 2 children. And I got involved with the home birth movement in Florida. I got involved with the breastfeeding group. I started teaching yoga classes to postpartum women. And I realized that, why didn't I become a nurse? I don't know why I didn't at the time. I think because I needed that background, it was going to be a benefit in teaching. And then what happened was that my husband and I, we couldn't decide what, he didn't know for sure what he was going to do. And I was sitting, he had gone back to school to get a certification in another area. And I was sitting in a Unity church saying to myself, God, if I'm supposed to stay with this man, he's going to get a job in Virginia Beach. Because I had become familiar with Edgar Cayce and the ARE when I was at West Virginia University. And I thought that I was supposed to be here. And next morning he called me and said, "You'll never believe where there's a job." And I'm just like, "Well, why don't you just hit me in the head with a 2x4? Because how do you get an answer that fast?" So we moved up here, and he was teaching at Old Dominion University. And I found out that as his spouse, I could go for free. So I went to the nursing department, and I said, when's applications? And they said, "Well, it's already passed, but do you have any chemistry?" And I said, "Oh, I majored in chemistry." And they said, "Sometimes we make exceptions." And so I got into the nursing school. And I had 2 children at the time. I got in nursing school, started the next year. And I happened to be pregnant when I started. I had him last day of the semester on the day of my final. And then I went on and finished nursing school. My last year I had my daughter. So I'm up to 4 kids now, right? And I knew I wanted to work labor and delivery. I thought about becoming a midwife. And it was hard to get a job as a nurse then, believe it or not. They're desperate for nurses now, but then they didn't need as many. So as I went through nursing, I finally got to work in labor and delivery, and I feel like that was really my calling, because I worked with a lot of patients, and I was able to stay with them, and I was able to make the birth experience something special for them, because I had my philosophy of why it should be, and that women should be honored in their choices. I became a bit more of a feminist during that time, because I felt like physicians, obstetricians, men did not listen to their patients enough, and I always tried to be an advocate for what my patient wanted. So from that, I went on and continued through that. Worked in high-risk obstetrics, went on, got my master's in nursing, then I went on, after I got a job teaching at Old Dominion myself in the nursing school, I went on and got my PhD. And because I felt like that if I were going to ever write or communicate, that doctoral degree would mean something on paper, simply because I wasn't being recognized in other way, and that would give some validation. Not that it changed what I knew, but it was just there for appearances to back up what I said. So that's how I became a nurse, and I've had a lot of wonderful experience in that profession. Your life lesson is that everything that happens to you does happen for a reason. I don't believe that anything happens because of bad luck or anything else. Everything happens to you for a reason. Don't react to the lesson. Take it in and learn from it, grow from it. Try not to react from it. Don't go, "Why me? Why not me?" I have learned from everything I've been through. Everything I've been through has given me the ability to work with women in particular in a very special way, because I can share my experiences and help them to know that they can grow through this. Everything that happens to you, you can grow from. Don't let it possess you. Don't let it be your reason for being angry. Everything happens for a reason, and it's a life lesson. Everything happens, you learn from it. What can I take from this with me? And how can I share it that it will be with benefit to others? And that every human in the world, we are all spiritual creatures. We are all from the same divine source. And this is universal. For my seasoned women, it is difficult in this world, because youth is what is put out there in front of us all the time. You have to be young, beautiful to be, if you're a woman. Seasoned women are not honored in our culture. There are cultures in the world that honor seasoned women. They're revered for what they know and what they can bring to the culture, to the society they're in. One specific example I can give is I teach about breastfeeding in my class and how important it is. And one of my male students made the comment of, well, but the woman's, woman's breast loses a certain attraction when you breastfeed. And I said, did you know there's a culture in Africa where they honor women who have dangling breasts because they serve their purpose? They're honored for that. And if you're looking at it from the benefit of what you get from it, you're looking at life the wrong way. Women should be honored. We are the foundation of the world, that what holds it together in calmness. And I think that as we are going through the times that we're going through right now, that we will enter more of a matriarchal age where the wisdom of seasoned women will be of benefit in our culture. As a seasoned woman, I want you to know that you are important. You are a vital piece of our culture, especially in this country right now. You are a calming influence. Everything that you do can change what's happening. Believe in yourself. Know that you are important. You are here to facilitate the change that's coming. And we need to have seasoned women guiding us. Don't regret anything that's gone on in your life. Don't say, I wish I could go back and change. I wish I could have done this or that. Where you are is where you're supposed to be. Reflect on your life and live it to the fullest with that knowledge that you can share with others.